lot of games try to creep you out, but very few succeed. The original Condemned was one that delivered, plunking you down into an impressive environment with all manner of lowlifes. It was an underappreciated 360 launch game that was unlike anything that came before it. It's been a while, but the follow-up Condemned 2 Bloodshot is finally sulking on store shelves, waiting to deliver another dose of isolated terror.
Ready to have some fun.
Taking place directly after the first game, Bloodshot picks up the story of Ethan Thomas, a forensic investigator / SWAT team stalwart. Since the first game, Ethan's fallen prey to the bottle.
I'm tired, and my head is screaming for a drink, so get to the point.
And who can blame him after a serial killer sliced off one of his fingers? He's battling demons both figuratively and literally. While the city runs wild, its denizens prey to sonic-induced violent urges. He eventually stumbles upon a secret sect of auditory masters called the Oro, and finds himself struggling to discern exactly who the enemy is. It's a grim story about a man whose life is in shambles and everything is falling apart around him. Twists abound. Some are obvious and some are not. It goes a little overboard at times and the primary antagonist ends up being lame, but no one can say the story isn't unique, if not ridiculous.
Hello.
The funny thing about the first Condemned is that when it was just about to wear out its welcome, it ended. The same basically holds true here. Bloodshot's single-player campaign is almost exactly as long as the first game. There are 11 different missions to slug your way through, with plenty of save points along the way. It's incredibly linear, with almost all stray paths leading to reserves, but when you're in the pitch black suffering horrible hallucinations, a little hand-holding can be your friend. And you can use all the friends you can get, considering there's no cooperative options. As you drag your feet through the claustrophobic solo mode, you unlock a series of challenges that range from blowing up as many wind-up dolls as possible to protecting cops from an onslaught. Aside from that is a surprisingly unique and in-depth multiplayer offering. There are some interesting game types, like one where one team has to hide severed heads in coolers while the other team tries to scan them, and another where 2 lonely players are forced to take on 6 raging bums. You get the traditional deathmatch options as well, and even these modes are given new life by the predominantly melee-tilted combat. Condemned 2 definitely provides a lot more mileage than the first game. The multiplayer is surprisingly good, and the single player is plenty long. We would have liked to see a few more challenges and something worth unlocking, but there's still plenty of content. Probably 60% of games today are played from the first-person perspective, but Bloodshot is relentless in its quest to keep you there at all times. Whether you're climbing or falling, it's always from behind Ethan's eyes. It's a tried-and-true tactic for a reason, and it works really well in the rat-infested slums the game takes place in. The twist to this series is that most of the combat is hand-to-hand, using any conceivable item as a weapon. Bowling balls, cleavers, crowbars, locker doors, you name it. Firearms do make an appearance, but ammo supplies are scarce, and you have to make every bullet count. Because you almost always have to get in close to enemies to defeat them, you end up playing incredibly cautiously, listening for even the slightest rustle in the dark. It will undoubtedly put you on edge, and this is where the game truly shines. The combat itself tries to provide some depth, and when you're taking on enemies one-on-one, it does. The trigger buttons represent each arm, while pushing down on the right analog stick handles kicks. It's the sequence that you use these inputs that ultimately determines whether you'll pull off a wicked 1-2 combo or snatch up a destitute for some grappling action. Then there's blocking by holding both trigger buttons, which opens up a whole nother set of attacks. Things devolve, however, when multiple foes come a-calling. The combat system simply isn't built to handle it, so you either run away and try to isolate the enemies or put your back in a corner and come out swinging. Running away exposes the enemy AI as a joke. They'll repeat the same paths over and over until you get within a certain distance, and their one-track minds are easy to manipulate. That's not to say you won't die, you will, and then you'll have to suffer through a loading screen every time. Woven into the splattered fabric of the game is Ethan's drinking problem.
Hey, screw you!
Whoa, we got ourselves a mean drunk. We were grade A assholes.
If he doesn't get a shot, every once in a while he becomes jittery, making it practically impossible to aim a firearm. And let's not forget that Ethan is a forensic investigator. You're not just following blood trails this time. Each crime scene has several clues, and you'll have to manipulate your view to find them. Multiple choice conversation trees also offer hints, and you're rated based upon selecting the questions that will get you the most information. At the end of each mission, you're rated based upon how many items you find and your investigative prowess. The rating then translates to upgrades like quiet boots for sneaking, a stun gun, or upgraded skills, though you can still get through the game getting the lowest rating. It can take a while to get the timing of the hand-to-hand combat, and with each enemy having different attack patterns, more often than not it amounts to blocking, and then landing a blow, and then repeating the process. There are tons of combos, punches, and kicks to perform, but you rarely have the time to make use of them. The first Condemned was a fairly impressive-looking launch game, but the standards have risen considerably since then. There is a slight bump in fidelity, but it's not easy to tell the difference between the first game and the sequel. The good news is that you're still kicking around dilapidated, bum-infested slums and buildings so dark and dreary that you'll be praying for open air. It can be oppressively creepy. If you liked that about the first game, you'll love it here. If you've never experienced it before, be warned. The first Condemned was a fairly impressive-looking launch game. On the audio front, the 5.1 surround sound mix is incredibly convincing. When the visuals are this dark, you have to rely on sound a lot more, and it's definitely up to the task. If only the gunfire could reach the same standard. Pistols and shotguns sound like cap guns, which is surprising considering the game's developer also created Fear, a game with some of the best gun effects in the business.
Stop! Let him go.
The original Condemned was really the first of its kind. The first-person pugilism investigative challenges and somber tone have been expanded for Bloodshot, but still the experience remains relatively the same, just more supernatural and less plausible this time around. The anything as a weapon aesthetic is still ace, but the combat system is too unwieldy when tackling multiple foes. It's a game of up and downs, but horror fans will be more than satisfied with its bleak and gloomy disposition.
Hey, we're just having a little